Have you ever stopped to think about whether every truth should be shared with your children? In this special video, we reveal the 9 things that should never be told to them, and how protecting certain secrets can profoundly impact children's well-being and development. Get ready, because the latest revelation will be surprising, and you may never have thought about the impact it could have on your family. Stay with us until the end to understand every detail of this approach and discover how these silent secrets can strengthen your relationship with your children. If you care about being the best guide for them, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more content like this. Carmen always believed that absolute honesty was the key to a united family. She used to tell her children that a home without secrets was a home without problems. However, life would teach her that some truths can carry too much weight for young people, turning transparency into a double-edged blade. Carmen's trust in sincerity was not just a personal choice, but a family philosophy. Over time, however, she began to realize that certain information was having an unexpected emotional impact on her children. What once seemed like an act of responsibility and openness now has consequences that are difficult to reverse. Carmen discovered the hard way that unrestricted sincerity can generate anxiety and fear in her children, making the family environment tense. This realization was the first step for her to rethink how and what to share with them, always with caution and sensitivity. Parents often think that by being honest about their financial situation, they are educating their children for the real world. Carmen believed this until the day she realized how much this practice was burdening her children. The pressure was too much for young, inexperienced minds who should have been free from these worries. The impact was felt in the family atmosphere. Children began to show financial concerns that, in fact, should not be their responsibility. A simple outburst about the household budget ended up turning into sleepless nights and unnecessary anxiety for young people. It was from this experience that Carmen learned the importance of adapting financial dialogue to appropriate language. She began introducing concepts like saving and budgeting in a healthy way, without revealing distressing details that could negatively affect her children. Imagine that a family's finances are like a pressure cooker. Opening this pot at the wrong time can cause disaster. It was exactly this metaphor that Carmen began to see when she shared financial problems with her children, and the emotional explosion was almost instantaneous. This metaphor helped her realize how much financial details need to be controlled before being shared with her children. Suddenly, seemingly harmless information turned into a constant and unnecessary concern for young people, who began to imagine the worst about the family's stability. Upon understanding the emotional pressure that these details placed on her children, Carmen began to avoid numbers and focus on financial concepts. She taught about planning, economics, and responsibility, without opening the pot too much, and without causing the negative impact as before. Realizing she was overloading her children with information, Carmen decided to adapt her approach. She replaced discussions about financial problems with simple, age-appropriate financial education lessons that they could assimilate without anxiety. One of the methods she adopted was financial game time, where the family got together to play games that taught about money in a light-hearted way. Instead of talking about debt and actual expenses, Carmen focused on concepts like savings, investing, and responsibility, creating a fun and instructive learning experience. With this change, Carmen saw that her children not only learned about finances in a healthy way, but also felt more confident and free from worries that were not theirs to handle. In this way, she was able to balance the responsibility of educating them with the need to protect their emotions. The challenge of teaching her children about finances without causing anxiety led Carmen to look for new strategies. She realized that it was not necessary to share financial difficulties to teach responsibility, and began using practical examples and fictional situations to explain how to manage money. She introduced the MAP rule, teaching about financial goals without revealing obstacles along the way. Carmen taught the importance of saving, talking about priorities, and making wise financial decisions without directly mentioning family problems. This approach has resulted in their children becoming financially aware, but free from the emotional weight of concerns that don't belong to them. Carmen found the balance between teaching them and protecting them at the same time. Even with their new approach, Carmen's children at times asked direct questions about the family's financial situation. In these cases, she needed to develop the ability to give careful answers that did not raise unnecessary concerns. She used the guided reflection technique, where instead of answering directly, she asked questions like, "Why is this important to you?" Or, "How do you think we are handling this?" This method helped them understand their children's curiosity without revealing complex information. With this technique, Carmen realized that most of the time, her children's questions were motivated by simple insecurities, which could be resolved through dialogue. This way, she was able to protect her children from unnecessary emotional burden. In addition to financial issues, marital conflicts also represented a challenge. After an argument with her husband, Carmen realized that by venting to her children, she was putting them in an uncomfortable position, which created an environment of tension. She noticed that by bringing the burden of marital problems onto her children, they felt responsible for something they didn't fully understand, creating anxiety and stress. Carmen realized that children should not be confidants about the couple's difficulties. From then on, she and her husband established the closed-door rule. Any serious discussions would take place in private, away from the children. This helped to maintain a lighter family environment and protect the emotional health of young people. Upon realizing the impact of her outbursts on her children, Carmen understood that, unintentionally, she was placing them in a role that was not theirs, that of therapists. She looked to her children for emotional support, but in reality it was emotionally taxing on them. Carmen saw that by transferring to them concerns that did not belong to her universe, she was making them mediators of the relationship, which affected their emotional security and emotional bonds. This placed them in a judgmental position, which was inappropriate for their ages. To resolve this, Carmen began to seek other forms of support and left the role of confidant to adults and close friends. This way, the children were able to return to playing their natural role without carrying such a heavy emotional burden. The closed-door rule was one of the most effective strategies Carmen adopted. By deciding that conflicts would be resolved privately, she ensured that her children would not be exposed to information or tension that could affect their emotional peace. This measure brought a new balance to the home, where children began to feel protected from the ups and downs of their parents' relationships. Respecting privacy and preserving children's emotions was essential to creating a healthy atmosphere. Over time, Carmen realized that the practice of keeping these matters between her and her husband helped her children develop a positive view of the family. They felt safer knowing that their parents' issues would be resolved without them being involved. Being honest with your children can be a virtue, but it is necessary to measure the information that really should be shared. Carmen learned the importance of strategic honesty, where explanations are given only to the extent that is healthy for children's understanding and emotional safety. She began to answer complex questions in a simple way, offering answers that conveyed security. Instead of detailing every aspect of a problem, Carmen chose to talk about what she was doing to solve it without exposing unnecessary details. This approach helped her children trust her more, as they realized that even in difficult times, she was in control of the situation. This reinforced a feeling of security that was more important than any specific information. Everyone has stories from the past that may not be appropriate to share with children. Carmen learned this lesson when she decided to tell a story from her youth, which ended up shaking the image her children had of her. Once, trying to inspire her son, Carmen shared a questionable choice she made in college. The story, which she thought was a lesson, ended up calling into question the ethics she defended so much, creating confusion among her children. It was a tough lesson, but she learned that it is possible to transmit values and learnings without revealing details that could cause disappointment. Carmen realized that some secrets are better kept, especially when the goal is to protect the trust that children place in their parents. Carmen learned that some stories from the past can have a devastating impact on how children view their parents. At a relaxed dinner, when trying to share a life lesson, she talked about an impulsive decision she made in her youth without imagining the reaction it would cause in her children. They were shocked to hear that their mother, who always preached values of responsibility and transparency, had hidden something serious from her own parents in the past. This revelation shook the trust they had in her. Carmen noticed that her oldest son, Alejandro, questioned her more and seemed suspicious of other things she said. The image of an upright mother who never deviated from the values she defended so much suffered an unexpected blow. What was supposed to be a lesson turned into a mirror of the mistakes she tried so hard for them to avoid. Reflecting on the event, Carmen realized that not all experiences need to be shared, especially those that can cause an emotional rupture. She learned to select what really contributes to her children's growth, without destroying the positive image they have of their parents. Some stories can teach without having to expose the dark side of the past. Carmen understood then that when sharing her past, it is essential to consider the emotional maturity of her children. Certain lessons can be transmitted without the need to detail specific mistakes, thus preserving the respectful relationship and trust they place in parents. After the incident, Carmen decided that she could tell her stories, but always adapting them so that they were appropriate for her children's age and understanding. She realized that conscious editing of past experiences would be a way to teach important lessons without distorting what really matters. This way, instead of going into compromising details, Carmen started to focus on the lessons she learned from her experiences. She transformed challenging moments in her life into metaphors and reflections, so that her children could absorb the essence of what she wanted to teach, without becoming disillusioned by her mistakes. By using this new method, Carmen felt safer and more confident when transmitting values. She wanted her children to feel motivated by the stories, not disillusioned. Thus, she found a balance between being honest and preserving the moral authority and respect her children had for her. The practice of editing her stories showed Carmen that the past can be a powerful learning tool as long as it is used with discernment. She understood that children don't need to know every detail to be inspired and learn from their experiences. Carmen learned throughout her journey that even the most harmless comments can become emotional wounds in her children. One day, without realizing it, she compared her son Alejandro's sporting abilities to those of a family friend, and that simple phrase became a shadow for the boy. Alejandro, who always strived to do his best, started avoiding physical activities and showing a more withdrawn posture. The involuntary comparison made him feel inadequate and inferior, something Carmen only realized after noticing her son's discouragement in social and school situations. Upon seeing the effect the comparison had, Carmen decided to abolish these observations. Instead of comparing Alejandro to other children, she started comparing his achievements to himself, valuing his personal evolution. As a result, Alejandro began to regain his self-esteem and began to feel pleasure again in the activities he enjoyed. This episode taught Carmen that comparisons can be an invisible poison, even if they are not made with the intention of hurting. She decided that, from that moment on, she would praise each child's progress individually, strengthening each one's confidence and self-respect. Over time, Carmen realized that praising her children's efforts and progress without comparing them to others was a much more effective way of strengthening their self-esteem and development. She began to observe how each small achievement of Alejandro and his sister Sofia brought new learning opportunities. This type of individual praise was essential for them to feel valued for who they were, not for what they could be in relation to others. Instead of just praising results, Carmen learned to recognize effort, dedication, and progress, encouraging her children to challenge themselves without fear of failure. Over time, this new type of appreciation brought an emotional transformation in the children, who began to feel more secure and less pressured to achieve external standards. Sofia, for example, began to dedicate herself more to studying for pleasure, and Alejandro found himself motivated to explore new skills without the anguish of comparisons. Carmen then discovered that this method not only strengthened the family bond, but also made the children feel respected and supported. In this way, she learned the importance of valuing each person for their unique achievements, reinforcing love and security at home. The comparisons, even if subtle, left marks on Alejandro's self-esteem, who began to question himself about his capabilities. Carmen noticed that each comment, no matter how small, had the power to transform her children's view of themselves. Alejandro began to associate his value with what others did, and this affected his academic performance and his willingness to socialize. Carmen realized that she was unintentionally creating an environment of silent competition where her children felt they needed to meet standards that didn't make sense to them. Faced with this reality, Carmen understood that she needed to stop drawing parallels between her children and other children. She began highlighting Alejandro and Sofia's unique characteristics, valuing their individual qualities and encouraging them to celebrate their own progress. This new positioning of Carmen helped Alejandro to regain confidence in himself. The security he regained had a positive impact on other aspects of his life, proving that maternal support can transform self-esteem and emotional well-being. Carmen's new approach included focusing on internal comparisons, in which children were encouraged to compare their achievements with their own progress rather than with other people's. This helped them see how much they have advanced in different areas of their lives. She began to remind Alejandro and Sofia of the challenges they had overcome, showing how they had become stronger and more skilled over time. This practice made them proud of each step, realizing how much they were capable of growing. Over time, this technique strengthened the children's self-confidence, who began to understand that success is a personal and unique construct. Alejandro got involved in sporting activities again, with more pleasure and confidence in his abilities, without the anguish of being compared. Carmen learned that recognizing internal achievements was a way to strengthen her children's self-esteem without them feeling pressured. The result was a more harmonious relationship and a safe family environment for individual development. For years, Carmen cultivated the image of the perfect mother, always patient, organized, and in control. She believed that by showing herself unshakable, she would be giving her children the ideal example to follow. However, this quest for perfection began to take a heavy toll, both on her and the children. By creating this supermom image, Carmen ended up putting pressure on her children, who started to believe that they also needed to be perfect. This created tension in the family dynamic, where mistakes were seen as failures rather than learning opportunities. One day, Carmen accidentally hurt herself while cooking and let out a frustrated expression, something she rarely did in front of her children. They were shocked to see her vulnerable, but their surprise turned to relief when she explained that everyone makes mistakes, including her. This experience made her realize that showing vulnerability is also important for her children's emotional development. With this attitude, Carmen was able to create a more authentic and healthy relationship, where her children began to understand that failure is part of the growth process. By allowing herself to be vulnerable in front of her children, Carmen found a new path to respect and family connection. She noticed that admitting her limitations and mistakes, rather than diminishing her authority, actually brought her closer to her children. They began to see her as someone real, with her own difficulties, and not as an unattainable figure. This attitude brought a more honest atmosphere to the home, where the children felt they could also share their insecurities and fears without fear of judgment. Carmen encouraged these moments of exchange, where everyone learned together to deal with emotions and face difficulties in a healthy way. Alejandro, for example, started to talk more openly about his insecurities at school, which strengthened the bond between him and his mother. Sophia also demonstrated more confidence when discussing her own frustrations. This is all because Carmen knew how to create a safe environment where errors and vulnerabilities were accepted and welcomed. Carmen's vulnerability is what showed her children that no one needs to be perfect to be loved and respected. This value has become essential for family dynamics, providing more authenticity and strengthening mutual trust. Over time, Carmen realized that mistakes could be an excellent opportunity to pass on lessons to her children. She began to see each failure not as a problem, but as a chance to demonstrate resilience and learning. When she made a mistake, Carmen took the opportunity to reflect on what she could have done differently, sharing these thoughts with her children. This approach inspired Alejandro and Sofia to look at their own mistakes with a more positive outlook. Instead of fearing failure, they began to see their missteps as part of learning, which made them more confident and open to trying new things. Carmen also began to approach old mistakes with wisdom, showing her children that even adults are constantly learning. This created a positive cycle of reflection and self-understanding in the family, where the fear of failure had no place. This new look at flaws gave Carmen and her children a freedom that didn't exist before. They began to face challenges more lightly, knowing that any mistake could be turned into an opportunity to grow together. Carmen discovered that family secrets pose a big dilemma: protect them or share them with your children. She understood that although some secrets must be kept to protect children's emotional safety, others, depending on the context, can be revealed to strengthen the bond and mutual understanding. To decide, Carmen began to evaluate the importance and impact that each secret would have on her children's lives. She realized that some truths could be beneficial, but only when conveyed appropriately and at the right time. This required a new sensitivity and emotional maturity from her. One of the secrets she decided to share was about the children's grandfather, whose life involved complex decisions. By carefully telling the truth, Carmen helped her children understand the complexity of human choices without destroying the image they had of their grandfather. This exercise in strategic sincerity reinforced family connection and showed that honest dialogue, when well conducted, can bring growth and understanding. Carmen found a balance by discerning which secrets could empower rather than hurt. Over time, Carmen realized that revealing some family stories could actually strengthen her children's identities. By approaching their past with respect and wisdom, she gave them a deeper understanding of their own roots and what it means to belong to that family. When talking about the challenges her ancestors faced, Carmen offered real examples of overcoming and courage. Alejandro and Sofia began to value their stories, understanding that the family has a unique trajectory, marked by mistakes and successes like any other. These thoughtful conversations gave the children a stronger sense of belonging. They began to see their own history with pride, valuing the lessons that their parents and grandparents learned over time. Carmen thus found a way to transform the past into a powerful tool for her children's emotional growth. From this, they learned that people are complex, and that strength comes from accepting that complexity with compassion and understanding. Without realizing it, Carmen projected her own expectations onto her children, which ended up shaping the decisions they made. Although he never directly said what he expected from Alejandro and Sofia, his attitudes and subtle comments silently influenced his choices. She noticed the effect of this when Alejandro started talking about pursuing a career in business without showing any real interest in the topic. Upon reflection, Carmen realized that perhaps she was imposing, even unintentionally, her own dream on her son, ignoring his genuine aspirations. To change this dynamic, Carmen began to openly express that the important thing was for them to be happy, regardless of their choices. This freed Alejandro from the invisible pressure he felt and encouraged him to explore his passions, which included art and creativity. By giving her children space to follow their own interests, Carmen learned to truly support them without imposing the expectations that previously limited them. Thus, it created a healthier environment for them to build their own paths. Carmen understood that children often pick up on even their parents' most silent desires. Even without a direct word, they realize the aspirations attributed to them, which can generate emotional pressure that is difficult to bear. Upon realizing this, Carmen strove to avoid subtle influences, encouraging Alejandro and Sofia to freely discuss their desires. She sought to create an environment where parental expectations were not a burden, but rather genuine support for what they truly wanted. These frank conversations about dreams and ambitions helped Carmen understand her children better. She started to hear more about what really motivated each of them, and at the same time, the children learned that what mattered to Carmen was that they were happy on their own journeys. Through this process, Carmen realized that supporting her children meant respecting their individuality without imposing the dreams she had in mind. This respect strengthened the family relationship and provided a new level of trust between them. Understanding the importance of letting her children chart their own path, Carmen began to encourage them to dream without fear of disappointing her. By showing true support, she gave Alejandro and Sofia the freedom to explore what truly made them happy. She knew that by accepting her children's dreams, she was planting the seeds of self-confidence. When Alejandro decided to pursue art instead of business, Carmen didn't hesitate to encourage him. She realized that genuinely supporting her children's choices was a way to strengthen their independence and self-affirmation. This acceptance also brought peace of mind to Carmen, who began to trust their judgment more. Seeing Alejandro's enthusiasm and commitment to his passion, she found peace in knowing he was following an authentic path. This transformation made Carmen increasingly value her children's dreams. Supporting what they truly loved meant ensuring they would be fulfilled, happy, self-assured adults. Favoritism, even if subtle, can leave deep marks on the relationship between siblings. Carmen, without realizing it, demonstrated certain preferences which ended up creating insecurities and rivalries between Alejandro and Sofia. She understood that although it was natural to have affinities, these preferences needed to be carefully managed. When she realized the impact this had, Carmen committed to treating each child individually and uniquely, avoiding direct comparisons. She found ways to value each person's distinct qualities, fostering an environment where they both felt equally loved. This change in Carmen's approach brought more harmony to the brothers' relationship as they began to trust each other more. They realized that they were valued for who they really were and not how much they lived up to their mother's expectations. Over time, Carmen noticed that this new attitude brought more security to her children and strengthened family ties. Avoiding favoritism and encouraging each person's individuality was essential for the relationship between them to become healthier. Carmen began to dedicate individual time to each of her children, recognizing the importance of strengthening the personal bond. These individual moments helped her better understand Alejandro and Sofia's needs and desires, as well as creating unique memories between mother and children. These private meetings allowed each person to feel special and valued. Alejandro, for example, loved visiting art museums with his mother, while Sofia preferred cooking together. This specific dedication brought a new closeness between them. Carmen's practice of offering exclusive time to each child proved transformative. Both felt loved in a unique way, which reinforced respect and understanding between them, as well as strengthening their bond with their mother. This care from Carmen helped to avoid resentment and ensured that each child had their own space and attention, creating a closer and more harmonious relationship within the family. Over time, Carmen realized that silence was often more powerful than any advice. She found that by just listening to her children without rushing to provide solutions, they felt more confident sharing and finding their own answers. This approach led to Alejandro and Sofia talking more openly about their lives, as they felt that their words were respected and valued. By listening patiently, Carmen gave them space to reflect and mature their own ideas. The practice of silence transformed family dynamics, providing active and non-judgmental listening. Carmen realized that this space for reflection was what her children needed to develop confidence in their own decisions. This wise silence made Alejandro and Sofia feel understood, and their relationship with their mother became deeper and more meaningful. Carmen learned that often being present is more important than trying to resolve it. Active listening was one of the most powerful tools Carmen adopted to build her children's confidence. By paying genuine attention to what they were saying, she created an environment where they felt truly heard and respected, something essential for emotional development. Carmen tried her best to listen without interrupting, reflecting on what her children shared. This made Alejandro and Sofia open up more, knowing that they would always find understanding rather than judgment from their mother. The practice of active listening transformed moments of conversation into something deeper and more meaningful. Once they realized they could speak without fear, the children began to share their concerns and achievements more frequently. This simple act of listening made Alejandro and Sofia trust their mother even more. Carmen realized that, to be a good counselor, first and foremost, she needed to be a good listener. Finally, Carmen understood that more than any advice or expectation, what the children needed was a safe and free space to grow. She realized that her role was to create an environment where Alejandro and Sofia could develop their skills and passions without external pressures. She began to value their independence, encouraging them to explore the world with their own eyes. By allowing them to make decisions and deal with the consequences, Carmen ensured that they have matured naturally and healthy. This freedom made Alejandro and Sofia feel safer and more prepared for the challenges of life. Knowing that they had their mother's unconditional support gave them confidence to walk their own way. So Carmen understood that the best gift she could give to her children was respect for her individuality, creating a home where they felt welcomed and free to be who they really are.